What does it all mean? It's about onion. We are Myth Vision.
Welcome to Myth Vision Podcast. Your host, Derek Lambert here. Dr. Luther G. Williams is still absent. He's in his basement somewhere writing up his book, delving deep into esoterics. And we're going to have a surprise today with some of that stuff too. But, guys, be on the lookout for the book. When it comes out, I'll let you know, and be sure to help contribute. We'll keep bringing you guys the best guest. And we have one of them here with us today, Robert W. Sullivan IV. How you doing, Robert?
Hey, Derek. Thanks for having me back on the Myth Vision podcast. I think the first and only time I've been on, I think it's been about 8 months ago, maybe 6-7 months ago. So I know we had a great conversation back then. And we talked about returning, and so here I am. I look forward to continuing the conversation. As far as Luther goes, yes, in a basement working on a book. I know firsthand what that is all about.
Oh, yeah, and you've wrote 4 books. So our audience absolutely needs to get a hold of this stuff, because a lot of even modern day people who are artists who are making these movies are incorporating ancient knowledge, ancient symbolism, these things into their movies. And so a lot of your stuff surrounded that. You've got a book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. You have another book, Cinema Symbolism, and the artwork for the book covers are beautiful. It's a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies. I could see a movie about that. Cinema Symbolism 2, more esoteric imagery in popular movies, and The Witches of Highgate, a pact with the devil. Love it. I love it.
Yeah, the last book is a work of fiction. The others are not. The Royal Arch was my first book. That was published originally back 7 years ago. I mean, I can't believe 7 years have gone by. It's been subsequently republished as a second edition. Same thing with Cinema Symbolism, and Cinema Symbolism 2 is its sequel. Pact with the Devil is a work of fiction. So if you're into gothic horror, erotic mystery, murder mystery, check that one out. That's definitely will be up your alley. What I'm doing right now is, we were talking off air, is I've kind of backed off the podcasting for a little while. I think the last show I just did one recently with Chris and Cherie Geo, but pretty much going back to March, I really kind of backed off a little bit, because I was a little worried that this could be starting to become a little hackneyed, repetitive. I mean, we were talking about how many times can you decode the Matrix movie or the Wizard of Oz. And what I was doing is, I've been working on my 5th book, which is Cinema Symbolism 3. That should be out January to March of 2020. So I'm really looking forward to that. And when that comes out, as I was telling you, I'll start this process all over again. I'll have a brand new slate of movies that we can, all analyze and talk about. And so I can give you a little preview of it, before the show's out. And I've also been going back and just doing some re-editing to my earlier books. This is something I've been planning on for quite some time, but I just never really had the time for it. And right now I do have the time. It's, I have been afforded the ability to go back and just do some re-editing. It's funny the way it works. You write something, and a few years later you look at it, it's like, oh God, did I really write that? You got to tweak it a little bit. I'm not rewriting the books or anything, good grief, but just making some edits. There's some minor, grammatical mistakes in the book, nothing that you can't read, nothing that, like, there's no pages missing or paragraphs inserted upside down or anything like that. Just some minor things I wanted to fix. But no, I've been extremely busy. And again, thank you, Derek, for the invitation to returning to Myth Vision. And I know, we bandied some emails about with, some topics you wanted to talk about. So I'll let you open up and we can do potluck. You want to just throw some talking points or questions at me, and we'll just take it from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember I wanted to go back a minute, because Kristen Whitaker Hood. She introduced me to you by name. However, and she's from the Mythicist Milwaukee show. And they had introduced you to me, and I said, huh. And when I saw a picture of you, I remembered seeing a video clip where I did a lot of research on astrotheology a while back, and I was looking for people who explain it, because a lot of times visual audio helps me rather than delving into large volumes trying to comprehend this. And I saw you explaining it in a very well said, easily articulated way that made sense to me. And I was like, whoa, that guy, I'd love to talk with him. And you were on my show. I was like, wow, this is cool. We had started a show, it developed and evolved into what it is today. So I wanted to talk about some astrotheology and see where this thing goes, if you don't mind.
Well, let's start off with that. Astrotheology is a doctrine. It is, I guess it is intertwined with astrology. And what it essentially entails is, I think in my opinion, it's one of the real keys to decoding a lot of mysteries. Once you begin to see once you begin to understand it, you will see so much in our culture, in our religions, is coming from this. What it essentially entails, astrotheology, is the anthropomorphizing of the stars, the moon, the heavenly bodies, the planets, the sun, into personalities, into characters that embody the traits and archetypal qualities associated with different constellations, the zodiac, the moon, the sun. And this is all mythology that basically goes back to the dawning of mankind. So it's no wonder this stuff is still with us. And when you really begin to understand this, and it's controversial because there's really two ways. It's really controversial when you apply it to the Bible, because there's two ways of really looking at it. There's three ways. And the third way is I reject. The third way is it's a coincidence. I don't buy into that. The other two ways is you could say that the stories of the Bible are just astrotheology. They're the old solar pagan lunar myths with new names on them. Osiris, Horus is Jesus, Mithras is Jesus, the sun god, the resurrected savior, born again every morning, doing battle with the works of darkness. What happens to the devil, the dark lord, when the light comes? Well, it runs away. It disappears, right? Because the sun's up. The whole idea that Christ is the sun, what happens with the sun on its annual journey? Well, it's helped by 12 houses of the zodiacs that it passes through. These are the 12 apostles. You see this in Judaism with Moses, being the sun, the 12 tribes of Israel. Same exact thing. So you can look at it and say that that the characters of the Bible are just complete, mythology. They don't exist, and they're just the reinventions of this old pagan solar stellar lore. Or you can say, and this is what a lot of the Masonic thought on this stuff is you could say that the characters of the Bible, the Moseses, the Jesuses, were real, or there was some person out there that they were based upon. But when it came time to crafting the story of this person, like, for example, with Jesus, this is the best example I can give. When it came time to creating his religion at the Council of Nicaea in 320 AD, 300 years later, the Christians, pagans, Gnostics, Neoplatonists who created Christianity just relied on the old solar legends to formulate his story around. So you could say, okay, well, there's a real Jesus, but this is what Manly P. Hall and Albert Pike essentially say, is there was a real Jesus, but at the Council of Nicaea, his story was corrupted with sun worship. They just used the old solar pagan allegories, tales to formulate a religion around. And that's why you see these earmarks of the Egyptian mythology, the Persian religion, the old, Roman, Sol Invictus, Mithras cult, pervading Christianity. So you can look at it from a real hardcore conspiratorial standpoint and say, okay, it's all made up. It's just, total mythology. It's the old, pagan, solar, astral religion. rebranded, renamed, or you can kind of take more of a moderate approach to it, which is probably the route I try to take, because in the end, and I just try to do this objectively as a lawyer, I always say to myself, I wasn't there at the time. So, I mean, I can't say to you, there was no Jesus Christ, because I wasn't in the Holy Land 2,000 years ago.
Exactly.
I mean, I just can't tell. I could, as a lawyer, I could argue it both ways. I could tell you why it didn't exist. I could argue it the other way. I could say why it did exist. I think what's pretty irrefutable, though, is the stories in the Bible. A lot of them are based upon these old solar, astrological, mythological tales. I think that's pretty irrefutable. The hardcore question becomes, was there a real person that these legends were based upon, or is it just all fantasy? Is it just all Star Wars? That's the $1 million question.
Mm-hmm. That question is, I find very valuable and very important personally in my own research. At the same time, you have the two camps: historicism, mythicism, and ultimately mythicists say it was a mythology that was euhemerized into a historical person. And vice versa, the historicists say is a guy who became mythologized into a god. Right. And so either way, I get it, because at the end of the day, they both end up the same thing at the end. And what that is you have a mythology that has been shrouded around the possible human or the possible, euhemerized myth. And nonetheless, there's still some esoteric truths to these things. There's some valuable lessons. There may be some time relevant things that were good for the time that these things might have been written, or significant to their contemporaries. But you're going to, and I like how you did that before we end up going into a few examples, because
examples are the key to this.
It really is, because I've listened to skeptics. Okay, I'm a skeptic myself about a lot of things, and I think it's a good thing to be skeptic about things. And a lot of people are so skeptical. They think it's hogwash what we're saying here, that this is going on. And I actually do espouse that an astrological angle is evident. I mean, it's there. You can't get around it. I really think it is. So I say that to bring up this. People who deny Hamlet's mill, that there's some type of, astrological, understanding the stars, keeping track of the times, and all that plays into this as sacred knowledge for them. What would you say to them? I mean, what would you say to a skeptic who says, come on, you're overstretching it, 12 tribes and the 12 disciples, or 12 or the 12 zodiac signs and stuff? What made it evident to you? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you can start pinning it down. I mean, it's easy to say, okay, well, the 12, tribes, or the 12 apostles of the 12 houses of the zodiac. You can do a breakdown on some of these guys. I do it in the Royal Arch. I actually give you the breakdown. I don't have a copy of the book in front of me, but for example, what is it? The one Peter is, the first apostle. He's Aries the Ram, because that's the first, house of the zodiac. It's a sun sign. This is why, the three apostles who are ruled by the sun, John, Peter, and I forget the other one, they're always the ones who are the most zealous in carrying Christ's messages forward. Because, John is ruled by Leo. The apostle John corresponds to Leo. That's Christ's favorite apostle, because Leo is ruled by the sun, hence he's ruled by Jesus. The name Peter comes from the Greek Petra, meaning rock. This is why Peter is the rock that the church is established upon. I mean, again, it's lore, it's mythology. The whole idea with the Christian and Jewish religion has to do with the Platonic year, with the procession of the equinoxes, with Judaism being the Old Age Aryan religion, the sun in Aries, the ram, Christianity being the sun in the house of Pisces, the fish. So you have, with Moses, you always have the fire, Aries is a fire sign, so you have the fire symbolism around Aries. Moses grows the ram's horns. You always find pre-Reformation images of Moses with the two horns protruding out of his head. That's representing Aries the ram. The whole Exodus from Egypt, from the desert to the Holy Land, this has to do with the vernal equinoxes, why it's celebrated at the Passover. The whole word Passover is a reference to the sun passing over the equator in the northern hemisphere, heralding the return of a light. This is the end of the winter months. This is why it's Easter. in Christianity. It's the celebration of the return of the sun to the northern hemisphere, having been dead for 3 months, being trapped in the tomb of winter. Where have you heard that before? This is when the sun emerges from the 3-month tomb of winter. So, you can find examples of this. Again, with the whole thing with the precession of the equinoxes, with Jesus being the embodiment of, it would be like a Piscean solar age avatar. I mean, there's nothing but fish and water symbolism around Jesus. I mean, walking on water, washing the people's feet. Pisces rules the feet. All of his disciples are fishers of men. This is a reference to Pisces. You go back to Judaism, which is the Fire Age Aryan symbolism. Where does Moses get the name of, talks to God in the burning bush. Abraham sacrifices a ram. Again, this is all the earmarks of the old Aryan Age religion. You go to Pisces, which is Christianity, you get the fish water symbolism. So there is this, ebb and flow of symbolism coming from the stars, the moon, the sun, and it's the stories of the Bible are based upon the interaction of these heavenly celestial bodies interacting with one another. So for example, here's another one for you. In the Bible, in the New Testament, Jesus goes into the desert for 40 days and nights where he's tempted by the devil. Everybody knows this one. The 40 days, that's a reference to the sign of Cancer the crab. And the reason why Cancer was usually assigned 40 days instead of 30 was it's because Cancer has no bright stars in its in the constellation. Most of the other constellations that make up the zodiac have very distinguishable stars in them. Cancer does not. And it was always hard, because of that, it was always hard to tell when Cancer begins and ends. So it was always assigned 40 days. So whenever you hear the word 40 days, this is a reference to the sun in the house of Cancer. Well, what happens in the northern hemisphere under the house of Cancer? Well, it's scorching hot. It's the summer solstice. It's heat. It's a heat wave. This is why Jesus, the sun, is perishing in the desert, right? Who shows up but Capricorn the goat, the devil? Why? Because Capricorn's opposite house is Capricorn. This is why the goat is allowed to badger the sun in the 40 days of heat. This is a complete astrological metaphor. Later, this is turned on its head when Jesus, but because Jesus is the sun, the sign of Cancer, June 24th, 20th, 21st, is when the summer solstice occurs in the northern hemisphere. This is when the sun's at its mightiest. So we have the story again. This time the sun is triumphant when Jesus rides into Jerusalem on the 2 donkeys. The 2 donkeys are the 2 stars in the house of Cancer. I forget their names, but they're named the greater and lesser donkey. This is the sun in the house of Cancer entering triumphantly, the sun at its apex in the northern hemisphere. Again, this is all allegory. This is all not real. It's happening, but in the heavens above us, not down on earth.
Wouldn't that make you an absolute heretic?
Oh, yeah.
But the cool thing, and when I like what you're saying here, tongue in cheek, I think it's very important that we say that and we specify. This doesn't mean that you're an atheist running around.
Oh, no.
You're not against this book. You're not out here trying to antagonize fundamentalists, but you do think it's absurd to assume this is a literal historical text in the sense that it has been interpreted for so long.
Absolutely. You can still craft the argument that there was a historical Jesus.
Right.
You can still say, this person was a divine origin. What the Manly P. Halls and the Albert Pike say is, when it came time to crafting this religion around this guy at the Council of Nicaea, essentially in 321, they just used the old stellar lore, the astrotheology, to craft this guy's religion around. So, for example, look at Christmas. The celebration of Christmas is the winter solstice. I think that's pretty irrefutable. The celebration of Passover and Easter has to do with the vernal equinox. The whole measurement of when Easter is determined has to do with the full moon after the vernal equinox. Same thing with Passover. It's guided by the celestial bodies. It's not just a coin flip done by the Pope in Rome or something saying, okay, Easter's going to be on this day. The whole date of when Easter is celebrated, for starters, it's the day of the sun, right? The day is the day of, because Jesus is the sun, so it's the day of the sun, of course, and it's the sun after the full moon of the vernal equinox. Why the vernal equinox? Because this is when the sun god is resurrected from the vault of winter. this predates Christianity. I mean, you get into the Egyptian lore with Osiris, with Mithras. The feast day of Mithras was December 25th. So you can craft the argument that the Christians who were formulating this religion were just relying on the old pagan mythology, and there was a strategic reason for doing this. You could say, well, why the hell would they do such a thing? It's because the Roman Empire was essentially pagan. So what's a better way to introduce your religion? You're not basically, what you're doing is you're not saying, okay, you could still worship the Virgin Isis, you could still worship Horus, you could still worship Mithras. You're just calling them Jesus now. It's the Mary Magdalene or the Virgin Mother. It's the same thing. We're just kind of switching the name around on you a little bit. It doesn't diminish the fact that there could be there could be a historical person who was born in 0 AD, who was a divine figure who, was sent in to bring some inner gnosis to mankind or something like that, or to redeem sin. I wasn't there. I can't tell you that didn't happen. But what I can tell you is that the stories crafted around this guy are definitely astrotheological, relating to the old stellar, solar, celestial lore. And this goes back to the dawn of man. We live in a high-tech world now, Derek, where, with the computer, the internet, we all have 9-to-5 jobs, but you go back 2,000-3,000 years. You had these bodies, the stars, the moon, the sun. What the hell are these things? It's from these stars and the interaction, with the sun. This is where you get all these stories from. Fairy tales, the little princess, the dawn, Aurora, Belle, you look at Beauty and the Beast running around in the golden robes of the sun, who is always trying to unify with some solar masculine figure. The unification of the moon being the feminine, the Bond girl, as it were, unifying with James Bond, the solar hero, performing, coincidentia oppositorum, the union of opposites, to go on and defeat, the evil, satanic villain. This is as old as it gets, and it's just been rebranded and repackaged for the last 2 to 3, thousand years. But it all goes back, all these stories, these fairy tales, these legends, the mythology, it all goes back to the oldest thing of all, which is the sun, the moon, the zodiac, the stars, the planets, and how they interact with each other, and their archetypical qualities, associated with them. That's where so much of this, when you understand that, when a person understands that, you will understand, the whole idea of crucifixion, of the death and resurrection of the Son, of light triumphing over evil, of darkness. Again, it's the oldest lore, and it's been present since the dawn of humankind.
Powerful. Well said, and that I can track exactly where you're coming from. Usually I always tend to go toward the biblical account because that's what I was raised, and I guess to say our culture's most adept into that. They understand the Bible more. And I love how you mentioned these things. I've heard it said the gospel's written in the heavens. It's written in the stars. The heavens declare the glory of God. Well, this probably ties into these same things you're talking about. To me, it absolutely makes sense. And I know how skeptics would disagree, but, and I'm not saying anything bad about atheists either when I said that. I just clarify because someone might hear that who is a fundamentalist and go, what? Yeah, you're saying some tough stuff for somebody who was a literalist like me back in the day. Now, I want to talk about maybe some stories specifically, because you really touched on a lot of interesting things. Come up with a story, one of your favorite in the Old Testament.
And we'll go to the Old Testament in a minute. But like you said, the Gospels. Let's look at them real quick.
Okay.
What are the 4 symbols for the 4 Gospels? There's your answer. That answers your question. It's the bull, it's the lion, it's the man, and it's the eagle. Okay. Why? These are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. This is all stellar worship. Anybody who knows anything, these are the 4 fixed immutable signs of the zodiac. The bull is Taurus. The man is Aquarius, the lion is Leo, and if you know anything about astrology, you know the eagle is Aquila the eagle, which is Scorpio. These are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. These are the 4 signs that the sun waxes and wanes upon every year. This is why they are the foundations of the solar church of Christianity. There's your answer. I mean, now you're not going to hear that in the church, but you will see, whenever you see those symbols for the four gospels, that is complete astrological symbolism. That is irrefutable. The Old Testament, well, let's see here. I mean, you can, you get into the story,
If you don't mind me mentioning real quick, because I have a buddy of mine, I can't name him. I will eventually, because he says, well, when his mom passes away, then he'll come out. He says if his mom found out what he believed right now, her life would be over. I said, no way. So yeah, he says he has this idea that technically the Old Testament could just be called the Sun Book. It's the story of the sun, so to speak. And Adam, he has this idea that Adam is the sun. Now, I know there's multiple different ways of looking at it and interpreting it. And if you listen to one person, they'll say this is the interpretation and that's the interpretation. But nonetheless, astrology seems to be the core here. Do you have an explanation from the very beginning, in the beginning God, and the first story with Adam and Eve idea? Do you have anything astrology-wise with that, or? Well,
you get into the whole idea of the serpent in the tree. I mean, this has to do with Kabbalah. This comes out of the Book of Enoch, which is another one of these sacred texts, where the tree in the garden is Hebrew Kabbalah, which is an emanation of the Godhead. You can look at the man and woman as perhaps, you can look at them as the constellation of Gemini, perhaps. You could look at, or as just allegorical, the first man, the first woman, the sun and the moon, perhaps. Enoch, I mean, again, another solar allegory, is taken away for 365 years. I mean, you don't need me to explain that one. You get into the whole story of Moses with the Israelites. I mean, this is again a solar allegory, being kept in bondage in darkness in Egypt. This is the sun moving from darkness of winter to the light of spring. And again, a lot of the rituals surrounding the Passover, the unleavened bread. If you research it, this is a symbol of the vernal equinox. The exoteric explanation, it's a bread of haste. As any Masonic scholar will tell you, when it comes to symbolism, there are multi-levels to this stuff. There's always the profane explanation, this is what Albert Pike would have said. This is the explanation that's told to everybody, but there's always these hidden underlying meanings that are kept for the select few. I mean, and what's funny about this is you get into if you start reading a lot of the, I'll go to the New Testament again. If you go to the teachings and the writings of a lot of the church fathers, they'll tell you this. I mean, there's guys like Origen who will say, Christianity has two doctrines, one exoteric, one esoteric. The exoteric is for, the people who show up in church. The esoteric is reserved for the hidden masters. You get into the Gnostic text from the Nag Hammadi library, where you get into the whole idea of the Gnostic Christ. And this is something that's really fascinating. And then this is, where the Jesus figure isn't this Son of God redeeming sin, but he's like the illuminator character, or the illuminating figure who's sent basically to awaken mankind from their stasis to achieve some sort of higher Kabbalistic Godhead. This is again heresy, but this is what this is the Jesus of the Gnostic text. And what this ties into is a lot of Gnostic beliefs of this whole idea of there being these two different gods out there. And this really isn't astrology or astrotheology, but this ties into Gnostic cosmology, where you have this one supreme Godhead. The Gnostics call this thing the monad. It's unknowable, it's unfathomable, and it has emanations. I'll just get into this real quick. And one of the lesser emanations known as Sophia, she's cast out, and as she's cast out, she births this creature known as the demiurge. And he creates our universe. He is the God of our reality, and he's a lesser God. He has no knowledge of the pleroma, of the monad, of this divine heavenly state, and he creates our universe. And many Christian and church fathers believe that the God of the Old Testament was the demiurge. The demiurge is essentially the asshole deity. Who wants to keep mankind in stasis, wants to put him down, and employs this host of angel demons known as archons to basically keep humankind into slavery. And the Gnostics believed that Jesus was this being, this messenger sent from the monad to defeat the God of the Old Testament, the demiurge. And so, there were a lot of Christian heretics who said, look, if you just look at this objectively and you read the Old Testament and then you sit down and read the New Testament, they said, these two books are talking about two different deities. I mean, two totally different gods. The God of the Old Testament wants to kill people, wants to murder people, wants to punish Egyptians, forces people to sacrifice, other people to him, wants to wipe out the Egyptians, hates everybody. But then you got the God of the New Testament, embodied by Jesus, who loves everybody, don't hurt anybody, be friendly to everybody. And a lot of these Christian Gnostics said, these two books are talking about two different deities here. One's the demiurge and the other is the spiritual Godhead. So this is why a lot of Gnostics follow Jesus and essentially knight Jesus as this Christian illuminator character. A lot of them saw the whole idea of the gospel tales as redempting sin, the dying on the cross, the death and resurrection. A lot of Gnostics and a lot of Christian mystics would have said, oh, this is the outer mysteries. This is the profane mysteries. There are these secret mysteries, and this is what the Nag Hammadi Library talks about. I mean, there's a great story in the text where I forget which one text it's in. I think it's the Gospel of Judas of all things, where the apostles, I can't remember, it's all 12 of them, but it's a lot of them. They're sitting around the meal, they're having a meal and they're breaking bread, and they're praying, and Jesus comes in and starts laughing at them. And they look at him like, what the hell are you doing? And Jesus starts walking around the circle and he's laughing at them. And it becomes very clear to the apostles that he's not laughing with them, he's laughing at them. And the story comes out that Jesus is essentially admonishing them because they're worshiping a false deity. They're worshiping the God of the Old Testament, which is no good. And basically says, you're doing the bidding of the demiurge by doing what your church fathers are telling you to do and look no further. And when you do that, you're done. You are done.
It's interesting you say that because my research that I've been doing and a lot of our guests who've come on, they point out that there's this kind of blend of orthodoxy in the New Testament, but it's not just that. Paul comes out and some weird stuff's going on. We know there seems to be a fusion of what I like to call some form of Gnosticism in a way, and orthodoxy, and they're trying to make it fit in one book. And what it seems to me, if you really look at it, where everyone talks about how the New Testament is being anti-Semitic because it's constantly ragging the Jews, and they're being at fault for this killing of Jesus, and they're at fault, they're the children of the devil, they're this, even Peter's called that. Okay, so all that being said, it makes me kind of wonder if it's not necessarily an attack on the people themselves, even though it's been interpreted that way and people have attacked Jews throughout history. I'm wondering if it's an attack on the people who are the apple of that God's eyes. And it's kind of like a hit in the face somewhat of Yahweh. And here's this new deity that nobody's seen the face of except for the Son. And it's funny because I thought we did have scenes where God was seen in the Old Testament or something, and yet here in the New Testament, this is a God that has never been seen except for by Jesus.
Right. In the Gnostic cosmology, the one that everybody knows is the Valentinus one. And what Valentinus essentially said was that this unknown Godhead, they call it the monad, it's unknowable, it's unfathomable. You can't understand it. It's beyond name, it's beyond comprehension. It's the spiritual Godhead that humankind is essentially striving for, but humankind is immured in darkness, immured in matter, because this world is a false creation. This is the whole Matrix movie. I mean, this is exactly the Matrix movie. What Valentinus said was, what the cosmology is, the monad, this Godhead, produces emanations. And the one emanation is known as Sophia. And what these Eternals try to do is they want to study the monad. As any Gnostic will tell you, this thing is beyond comprehension. And this desire to know the monad produces error. This is one of the splits between Christians and Gnostics, because the Christians say you can have this relationship with God. The Gnostics say you can't. This thing is unknowable. This desire to know the monad produces error, and it results in the casting out of Sophia, the birthing of the demiurge, and the crafting of our reality. What Valentinus preached was the way to escape this was to pursue knowledge, was that basically that to become all-knowing was a way that the demiurge wanted to keep you in a state of stasis, in ignorant, to be completely stupid, to be dumbed down. And the way to escape this was to become enlightened, to receive light. And that the more you became wise, the greater chance you had of freeing yourself from the demiurge and the archons. So the idea is that essentially the death moment is not important. It's the coming to Zen moment that's important. And this is the whole conflict between the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament, and the whole idea is Sophia is this fallen archon, or is this fallen aeon. That's what they're called. The emanations called aeons in Gnosticism. This is mirrored in Kabbalah. This is the Sephiroth with the tree of life. These are emanations of the divine Godhead. But Jesus comes into the world to redeem Sophia and to awaken mankind's divine spark, to put them on this pathway that leads you back to the pleroma. This is where the monad dwells, and get you away from the demiurge. So the idea is that this is the esoteric teachings of Christianity. A lot of the fundamentalists don't like this because they want to dovetail the Old Testament with the New Testament, say that God is one and the same. If you read the books, a lot of the early Christian mystics say, these are two different gods here. The God of the Old Testament is evil and cruel. The God of the New Testament wants everyone to love one another. So which one is it essentially? And a lot of them said, well, if you apply this to the Gnostic cosmology, the God of the Old Testament is clearly the demiurge, and the God of the New Testament is the monad. But again, Orthodox Christianity undermines that, where the God of Abraham is still the God of Jesus. And like I said, I don't unfortunately have a definitive answer for you. I could just present the paradigms, but it's worthy of discussion, and it's worthy to be aware of this stuff because, I think that the Jesus character or the Jesus figure in the Valentinius cosmology, the illuminator figure, I think he's really probably more fascinating. The whole idea, this ties into the gospel tales of the rebellion. That people forget this. Jesus was a rebel. This guy was put to death because he was a hellraiser. Mm-hmm. This guy wasn't just some passive go in the night flyby. This guy was put to the cross because he wanted to overturn. He was basically saying your worship is wrong. You're doing this wrong, and that's. Jesus by definition was a rebel. And that's where you get into where you watch a movie like, I'm not trying to be flip here, but you watch a movie with something like Fight Club or The Matrix. What is the heart and soul of those movies? It's rebellion. It's rebellion against the Hylic world, that is the creation of the demiurge. The more you destroy consumerism, the more you hate materialism, the more you harm the demiurge and the more you become enlightened. That is ultimately the teaching of the Gnostic Christ.
Man, I love the Fight Club. I love, I always see those memes. I think they're funny online where you send them to another people. And I wish Christianity was like Fight Club, their philosophy.
What does Tyler Durden tell the narrator? And Norton, he says, God hates you. That's the demiurge he's talking about. God wants to destroy your life. And this is the Gnostic text, that the demiurge employs this coterie of angels and demons known as archons, whose sole purpose is to keep you asleep, who's to keep you in material slavery, obsessed with consumerism. This is, the movie The Matrix. They live. The archons of The Matrix are the agents. Fall back asleep, stay plugged in, go to your job. This is the whole paradigm that Tyler Durden is rebelling against in Fight Club, because God hates you. And the best way to receive enlightenment is to destroy this Hylic world, this false reality, essentially.
I always thought, I never had any connection with that. I always thought, well, it's just one of those Shutter Island type of movies where, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio is on a boat. He's approaching the island. For those of you who haven't seen Shutter Island, and, you know, he goes on there with this detective. He's trying to find out what's going on. There's some mystery that's happening on this island. And long story short, you know, he's got these crazies in this asylum handing him notes, telling him little things, little secrets along the way. He thinks that his partner and he thinks that these other guys are all evil. Come to find out, he was actually himself one of these patients that they were trying to do test on, and they had to do lobotomy at the end. But all these things along the show that made you think everybody else, it was really him. So it's funny how this in Fight Club, I thought he was just some schizophrenic and that was it. But it appears that there's more layers to this thing. I mean, you're unlocking a lot of interesting things here. Now, I wanted to ask you one thing before we get into that, because I know I would like to talk about bouncing back and forth between, you know, the ancient myths and the modern myths that we call movies. Pertaining to Gnosticism, and I know that you have a background in Freemasonry. With Gnosticism, does Freemasonry have more of a connection to the Gnostic side of things than it does with the Orthodox side?
Yeah, I think it does. It's a great question you asked, because this is one of the things that really got me roped into all this, is because this whole notion of the death and resurrection solar God-man, I can't think of anything else to call this character. This appears in Freemasonry, and it is decidedly Christian. But then you have to peel off the layers of the onion, and then you find the Gnostic allegory, and then of course you're back to where we all started from with the sun worship. Then I guess you go first to the Osirian mythology in Egypt. But what's that? Well, that's the sun worship. That's the solar allegory. So I mean, for example, in the Masonic ritual, and I should point out that when it comes to Gnosticism and Christianity, there is an overlap. I mean, you know, you'll hear someone say, well, like the movie The Matrix, well, the Neo character is a Christ figure, you know, or the Truman Show, Truman is a Christ figure. Yeah, you could say that, but he's also a Gnostic figure, because there is an overlap between Christianity and Gnosticism. I mean, again, you know, in Orthodox Christianity, it can be deemed as a heresy, but nevertheless, there is a overlap between Gnosticism and Christianity. Where it gets into with Masonry is in the third degree ritual, where you have the whole idea of, again, the dead and resurrected solar God figure, where the candidate portrays Hiram Abiff, who is murdered by 3 fellow crafts. His body is buried west of the temple, again, death, setting sun, west of the temple, right? And his grave is concealed with a sprig of acacia. That's a flower sacred to the sun god Apollo. So again, solar allegory. When he goes missing, the King Solomon notices he's gone, of course, and dispatches what else but 12 fellow craft to go find the body. I mean, well, who are the 12 fellow craft? I mean, to answer the question is, but to answer it, the 12 houses of the zodiac going looking for their solar ruler. And they eventually find his grave. They find the sprig of acacia, and they know it, of course, because it's a solar allegory. It's a solar emblem. And they try resurrecting his body, and they try it at first with the grip of an entered apprentice. That doesn't work. Then they try with the grip of a fellow craft. That's the second degree. That doesn't work. So they try with the third degree grip, and that works. And the third degree grip is what's known as, what else? The strong grip of a lion's paw. That's a complete reference to the house of Leo, the lion, which is, again, the soul house of the sun. So all this comes, again, back to the solar symbolism. And you can definitely, without question, Eric, say, oh, well, this looks decidedly Christian. Correct, it does. But peel it back. What's underneath of that? Well, it's the Osirian mythology, the death and resurrection of Osiris by Isis, and the possession of the secret name. Because when the Mason is raised, he has the secret name whispered in his ear. And then what's behind all that? Well, it's the death and resurrection of the sun. Again, probably the oldest story ever told. So again, this is what, this is what really kind of started all this for me was, going through the Masonic ritual, as you know, I am a 32nd degree. is going through the ritual and then trying to understand, well, what is this trying to tell me? What is this symbolizing? And it's this old mythology of the dead and resurrected solar god man. I can't think of anything else to call it. I mean, and you wanted some, just real quick, because I know, you were really pressing me for the astrotheology, for the symbolism with
Right.
some of the stuff surrounding this stuff. I mean, here we go. I mean, Christ died. Christ is the truth, right? I mean, Christ dies at 33 years of age. Why? There's 33 vertebrae in the spine. What sits on top of the spine? Golgotha, the place of the skull. This is where Christ is crucified. This is because this is where all truth dies in the human mind. The two thieves on the side of Christ are the two fears that plague humankind: fear of the future, regret of the past, which Christ is trying to tell you to move off of. So again, the death of Christ at the place of the skull, this is symbolic, representing the murder of truth. The 33 years of Christ is, again, another allegory. The thieves are an allegory. Again, we're dealing with just allegory after allegory when it comes to the story. And like I said, I don't want to be too polarizing here, because you can say, well, this guy was real, but the pagans who created the religion essentially were just using this old symbolism to craft his religion around. But again, if you're interested in this, read the Royal Arch of Enoch book, because I go all out on all the symbolism surrounding the life of Christ, Moses, the solar symbolism, the esoteric attributes, as it were. Of which there are. I'm just skimming the surface. There are just so many of them.
What fascinates me, and this is just on that question. I love questions, and you bring up some fascinating points that you make it so easy to just accept for me, because it's so difficult. I hear some really controversial scholars who come in and they whip you up and your brain gets sidetracked. And pertaining to this, though, what you've done with the question of the historicity, was there a guy? Was there not a guy? What fascinates me about this Jesus character in history is, like, all right, if you're to compare him, and I've heard them try to compare him to Caesars, I don't know of any cult that developed from the Caesar on saying he was a phantom, or that he was not a literal flesh and blood human, that he was some type of ghostly type of figure. I don't know of any, and that doesn't mean probably too much to some people, but to me, it just seems really ironic that a cult or a group out of this following would come up and say, hey, this guy was not literally flesh and blood. Now, I don't know if that has nothing to do with whether he existed literally or not, but I just didn't see that out of any other cult. I didn't see that there was like a Gnostic type of they didn't really exist when it came to these historical people. Now, I could get it if it was a god that was in the heavens or something like we're talking about, a solar deity or whatever, but
it's a solar deity. That's essentially what, as Jesus exists in the New Testament, that's essentially what he is a solar deity or solar avatar. That's really the best way to describe it. This is coming out of Roman cults such as Sol Invictus, the cult of Mithras, the Osirian mysteries, the cult of Eleusis. These all incorporated these whole themes of death and resurrection. That's a straight solar allegory. Look at, again, if you want to see this in modern day, turn to the Matrix movie. What happens to Neo? He's killed and resurrected. It's the oldest. It's the oldest, mythology of them all, and it's where, Jesus in his preachings, be children of light. What's he telling you? Be worshipers of the sun. What did he just say? In the book of Revelation, Jesus says, "I am the bright and morning star." What's the bright and morning star? The sun. I'm quoting him directly. He just called himself the sun. Hello, you don't need Robert W. Sullivan IV to spin that one.
Yeah, and he also has the being the light of the world. That's another interesting, is that the illumination of the sun. Yeah. So your book, real quick, I want to touch on the Royal Arch of Enoch just real quick, if you don't mind. Is this in audio too? Do you have it in audio format?
No, I've never put any of my books in audio because I could probably put the work of fiction in. I've just never really pursued it. The reason I could not put the other books in audio is because there's too many illustrations. It would just, the books are rich in illustrations, which I think are key to understanding a lot of this material. And because of that, I've just never put them in audio. The books are in the print edition, and they are in the Kindle format, or the ebook, I should say. They're like, whatever it is, the Kindle, the Barnes and Nook, I think is what they call it. Yeah, it is. It's Nook. Kindle, that's the one that everybody knows. Ebook, some places just call them ebook. So you can get the ebook version of them. If you want the print edition, that's no problem as well. I mean, they're available to purchase on all the major online research sites. I do not sell the books personally. That's too time consuming and too cost effective. If you want them, just get them off of Amazon or Barnes and Noble. I personally do not sell any of the books or anything like that. I mean, I have printer distributors who handle all that for me. Again, I just don't have the time for it. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I am writing a 5th book, which is Cinema Symbolism 3. I actually have 3 other books that I'm kind of working on as well, but Cinema Symbolism 3 is taking front and center stage right now. I am also making, like I said, some edits to the other books. I hope to have all this done within the next 6 to 7 months. Is what I'm kind of shooting for. And like I said, the one thing that, I'll be excited about is to be able to start this all over with a new slate of movies. And I'll just tell you real quick. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
We can go off, just so people know, the one thing with Cinema Symbolism 3 that has just really consumed a lot of my time. I mean, I've been working on this shit since May, I think it's been. So maybe even April. Is Twin Peaks by Lynch. I mean, it's great stuff. I offered a little bit of a criticism of it in the book. When I first watched the TV show, I thought it was a little too screwy, and I did write kind of a harsh criticism of it. I have kind of come around to it a little bit more. I mean, I do like it, but I think there's some issues that I don't like with it, but it's Lynch and he's very heavy lifting. And the problem with the Twin Peaks material is there's so much of it. I mean, there's like 30 episodes from the get-go, then there's the movie, and then there was the show that aired on Showtime a couple of years ago. I mean, and it's not the sort of thing where you can like watch 5 episodes at a time. I mean, your mind will just explode if you try to do that. You just like watch one every couple of nights. So, I mean, this has just slowed the book down substantially, but I can report that I am nearing the conclusion of writing the Twin Peaks portion. And I think once that's done, the book will pick up substantially. But that's one of the topics in the new book will be the David Lynch Twin Peaks, all of it. The first 2 series, the Fire Walk With Me movie, and then the latest Showtime show episodes. So that's what I've been really working on, like I said, with these edits. I should have all this done. I'm thinking about the next 6 to 7, maybe 8 months top. So that's what I've been, really, really working on. And like I explained, I can't remember if I mentioned this. I know I mentioned it to you off air, was I kind of pulled back a little bit on doing the podcast. And just because I was a little worried that, material might be becoming a little more becoming stale. I mean, like I said, how many times can I explain the Matrix movie or the Wizard of Oz or something like that? I mean, I've been doing podcasting now since 2013. I mean, so that's almost, 7 years almost. So it's been a while. And, but I love doing it. And again, thank you for inviting me on. I love your show. And, we are covering some interesting topics here, so it's
absolutely
right on.
Well, see, this first episode here, we're going to do a second episode, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys are watching, be sure to tune in. This is just the first one. We touched on astrotheology, and he delved into some stuff that I'm sure rabbit trails could take us deeper into. You have to get the book. It's on your screen. The Royal Arch of Enoch. I mispronounced it. The first show we did, Dr. Luther G. Williams pronounced it correctly. I'm going to grab this book for audio reasons because I can read a book in paper and just forget what I'm reading after a couple pages and have to go again. But while I'm working, I don't know what it is. I can put earbuds in. There's a program where you can convert ebooks into audio. Yeah. And it'll read it to me. And I could just listen to your book and I'll be fascinated. Of course, I'm going to want the actual book to look at the actual pictures. But lots of symbolism, lots of astrotheology stuff. I love how you tie this stuff together. And maybe we'll have a show sometime talking about, if you can speak on it, Freemasonry connections. And wherever you draw the line, you draw the line. But because there's certain places you can and cannot go, I suspect. But that concludes this one. Stay tuned, because this second part, guys, we're going to get into some movies. I think that's where we're going to be heading here, because you got me wanting to ask you some questions, so we might as well. You have anything you'd like to share before we end this episode?
No, I know you'll put it up. I mean, I always, I always just direct people to the website. If you're interested in what we've been talking about and you're interested in the books, just go to my website. It's very easy to navigate. It's my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is www.robertwsullivan.iv.com, robertwsullivan.iv.com. Links to buy the books, links to my social media. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook. It's updated with upcoming appearances. This video, once this is posted, will go up there. And again, the site's very easy to navigate. Buy the books, information about me, information about upcoming radio shows I'm doing, book releases, things like that. So go to the site, check it out, www.robertwsullivan.iv.com.
You guys see the website on your screen. Be sure to check it out. It'll be in the description, the clickable link. You guys go check out his stuff and show him some love, because he is bringing very fresh insight, and I love hearing this content. Thanks for joining me on part 1. Let's get part 2 started here soon. All right, y'all.
So you want to